Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to our Saturday video, being our upgrade and commander build video here on the Ruggiero di Lauria, a tier 10 premium Italian battleship with 8 457mm guns, and some fun things going on with the ship. Yesterday we did a Friday highlight, and I did a ship overview. I'll tag that video here at the very end of this video if you want to see this build in action. So we're going to go through the armor, the modules, upgrades, and most importantly, the commander. So with that being said, what kind of battleship is the Lauria? Well, in my opinion, I'd say she is a mid-range to longer range battleship. Her concealment being 12.3 kilometer. Great, allows you to draw in that 13-14 kilometers to get some even more accurate salvos off with a ship that has, I think it's a 1.8 sigma, but the vertical and horizontal dispersion is a little bit better than Thunder, even though Thunder has a 1.9 sigma. Sigma just being the likelihood of your chances landing in the center of the target where you're aiming, and Thunder has 1.9 versus your Lauria 1.8. But with that really good dispersion and these pretty hard-hitting guns, I think this ship plays ideally in the mid-range of 12 to 16 kilometers. Otherwise, you don't want to be getting much closer than that due to her survivability, 79,200. It's among the lowest for tier 10 battleships in the game. So you can get focused down quite quickly where you don't have that robust health pool, something, maybe more like in Ohio or Montana or Yamato, GK, with that 90 to over 100k 1,000 health. That being said, let's go ahead and talk about the armor, which I did highlight briefly in yesterday's video. So pretty standard. You have a lot of 32mm on the bow and stern for this battleship, but it's really the mid section of the ship is where things get really become really interesting. One of the things is you have your citadel, which let me just take things away. So that's your citadel, okay? I'll talk about it here in a minute, but it's a very odd-shaped citadel here in the game. So you can actually see it's an exposed citadel when I add the layers back on with this right here. So you have 457 that extends all the way up, so it doesn't have that vulnerable cheek armor, kind of like Yamato and Musashi and Shikishima are known for. You can just kind of get angled about like this and punch right through in citadeling. She has a 457. Really strong, and just above it, she's got a 50, so you are going to be able to bounce some of those more heavy shells. Not as much with the 457 you can bounce, but if you're angling well, I think in total I played 20 games, 15 in randoms and more, and I've played in other game modes, and I regularly tank 2 million potential damage just sitting and angling because this ship has phenomenal forward and rear firing, turret firing angles. It's phenomenal. Maybe I'll put a little thing here on the screen to just show you that as we talk here. Then you see, 32 here, and then the deck is interesting, where you go, you have a 120 here, and also on the back. So you actually see she's a little bit more resilient actually when you're angled away, when you're dealing with enemy ships. So because you're not really pushing with this ship, you're kind of wanting them to push into you per se, kind of like a Conqueror, kind of like how Thunder plays in that regard. So you have this massive 32mm nose with the deck plating, but then goes into this 120. So she positions and plays better in this direction, as an example. And then you can see we actually have some 170mm armor here, and also a 200mm on the back end of the superstructure. So I think if I'm able to take that away, you can see a little more resilient. Maybe even if you're being bombed by CVs, you have a little bit more protection there than you do on some of the other tier 10 battleships. So this is actually quite nice, and this is something that kind of giving credit Wargaming for, despite some of her other very areas that are a bit more vulnerable and lacking. And then finishing off our armor belt series, it goes from a 457 to a 350 to a 150 up to the 50. So a lot of nice things are going on here. Now let's start talking about the citadel. Okay, so you can see it's 350, right? And then you have this armored deck slope at 80mm. So actually just right beneath both My brain just went completely blank. Right beneath the smokestacks. Now it is sloped up, so it is possible that some shells would just bounce up into here. But if you're taking on an enemy Lauria, as an example, then you would want to be probably aiming just right in here, just above the citadel, or above the water line, excuse me, beneath the smokestacks is where you're going to have the most success. So I'm also telling you that, be mindful when you go broadside. And then you see this, it kind of goes in this step up, step up. So just really interesting things that they've done here with the armor scheme here on the Lauria. All right, with that out of the way, let's keep... Oh, I missed one thing. The armor scheme for the main battery turrets. It's been a while after being away in the US for over 6 weeks, getting back into the rhythm of these videos. But frontal plate armor, 450, side 350, on the rear 250, 170 on top there, and then 150 on the forward part. So your strongest area on your turret is your front. Sometimes it's a mix and match. It tends to be generally true. And then usually it is the back of your turret that can be the weakest. So the turrets are pretty strong. I've not really had much of an issue with them being knocked out. I think this happened to me maybe twice when dealing with other battleships of larger caliber. But you can also see they're pretty rounded. So that does help deflect quite often. They're pretty smooth in terms of their appearance. So that is a nice thing to see here. And of course, 450 to 457 beneath. Alright, now we can keep going on. So let's talk about her modules. So with being a premium battleship, there's no upgrades there, but we'll just highlight this so you get a better understanding of how I currently have the ship set up. So we have the reload in main battery mod 3 in the 6th slot. So it's bringing me down to 26.4 seconds. And something I didn't even mention yesterday is when I activated Sansonetti with his Confederate talent, we were getting a reload down to 21 seconds in addition to Adrenaline Rush, and then I think we lost enough health, we got down to around 19 seconds. So they make a good pairing. We'll talk more about that. But I've gone for the reload in the 6th slot. So give us that 26.4 seconds. Minimum shell type switching time, 10.6 seconds, also with the commander skill we have taken. 180 degree turn time of 28.7 seconds, so it's actually pretty nice. Typically, I want 30 or less with the higher tiered battleships, if and when possible. Not always possible looking at Yamato. So I feel pretty comfortable having a 20.87 as is. Maximum sap shell damage, 16,600. And maximum AP shell damage, 14,900. These guns are identical to the guns that are on the Thunderer. With one difference on the AP, which we will talk about, and that's just the fuse time matches St. Vincent rather than the Thunder's fuse time. The hull is 79,200 hit points. The AA, and yeah, you have AA, yeah, you have secondary gun turrets, but they're really not crazy. There's nothing to hype up there. Your gunfire control system, your main battery firing range is 19.3 kilometers. So it's a bit of a challenge there, but we do get spotter plane, and we'll talk about that. Propulsion, 35 knots. If we throw on the Sierra Mike flag, we get 36.8 knots. If we use brisk on our commander, we can get up to 40 knots. Yes, so that is something to consider when we're talking about this ship's speed, paired with her good concealment, meaning you're probably going to get decent use out of brisk if you decided to run it here. Going into the upgrades, for the first slot, we've taken the main armaments mod 1. We're reducing the risk of our main battery becoming incapacitated by negative 20%. Our main battery survivability plus 50%, and our main battery repair time negative 20%. So all good things there, and helping us out. Maybe you could talk about the spotting aircraft mod 1 to give you a plus 30% action time on your spotter plane, if you so desired. So your consumable action time is 100 seconds, so then it take you up to 130 seconds. Basically meaning you could probably squeak 1 to 2 additional salvos. Well, you get 2 additional salvos out of it, basically. So there's that. Otherwise, these others are not really worth going into. For the second slot, damage control system mod 1. Risk of catching fire, negative 5%. Risk of flooding, negative 3%. This is the best one to go here. You can see it's even the one that's recommended here. You also have engine room protection, but you're with that lower survivability, which is kind of be something that kind of haunts this ship a little bit with only having the 79,200 hit points. You are going to want to do some things to help give you an advantage when it comes into building into the damage control, building into reducing your chances of catching fire, this, that, and the other. Third slot, we've gone with the Aiming Systems Mod 1. This is improving our main battery shell dispersion, reducing it by -7%. So I'll put it on the right side of the screen here how that drops us in our horizontal dispersion and our vertical dispersion. So making the ship even more accurate, which is a great decision to do in my opinion. We do get a slight buff on our secondary battery firing range, plus 5% in a slight minimum reduction in having more accurate secondaries with -5%. But you're really taking this for the main battery shell dispersion. Now, as I was referencing, our turret traverse time is currently 28.7 seconds, so I don't feel the need myself to run the main battery mod 2. This would improve our main battery traverse speed. So then you're probably getting at 28.7 down to around 26, I would say, something like that. But, you know, if the ship already has a decent traverse rate and it's an accurate battleship, why not build into the accuracy? That's what I would recommend doing so here. In the fourth slot, maybe two options. The first I've gone with is the Damage Control System Mod 2. This is reducing our fire extinguishing time and our flooding recovery time by -15%. You also need this, I would say, in terms of you're not an AA platform battleship. You have pretty poor AA, among the worst in the game, getting quite close to Yamato's AA, if I recall correctly. And you can see our AA rating, when I reference it, it's 73. Those other tier 10 battleships have much better AA platforms. So that Damage Control System Mod 2 is going to be helping you with the fire spam, which granted you already have that thicker deck plating we talked about. But this is going to help you, especially with CVs. It's going to help you with subs, just because with that smaller survivability, that smaller hit point pool, generally I think it's best here to build into your survivability on the ship. Now, with that being said, I think I have some interest on my end in thinking about propulsion modification 1, which is going to reduce time taken to reach full engine power when accelerating by -50%. Because you're playing more mid-range, you're playing a little more long-range, you can kind of keep playing with your throttle. I was doing a little bit of that in some of the games I've been playing lately with Lauria. Because you're just not constantly sailing, you're going to kind of come to a place where you're going a little forward, going a little reverse, trying to throw off enemy battleship's aim while you're returning fire, as an example. So I think there's some interest here, but to me, I end up with the Damage Control System Mod 2 just because this ship, it doesn't last long in a brawl in a fight. So if I can make her last a little longer, that's what I would lean to, and this has helped me in several situations that have been rather sticky, just to put the floods, put the fire out even faster, so I retain more of my hit points. Fifth slot, the clear winner, is going to be your Concealment System Mod 1. Ship's detectability range, -10%. Squadron detectability range, -10%. Dispersion of shells fired by enemies attacking your ship, +5%, so a little worse accuracy on their part. So you can see by the air, it's 10.1, and by sea, also having Concealment Expert on our commander, brings us down to 12.3, which is really great, and that's really one of the shining features. So you don't have a lot of hit points, but you have phenomenal concealment. So that's really what you want to be able to build in here. So it's probably towards the higher end of among the tier 10 battleships for really good concealment in the game. Moving on to the sixth slot, as I'm for some reason losing my voice, and I don't know why. You have the main battery mod 3, which is reducing our main battery reload time down by -12%, giving us that 26.4 second reload time. And then we do take a small hit on our main battery traverse speed, so that's why you're seeing the 28.7 on my end here. So we're increasing our DPM performance. In terms of tier 10 battleships with semi-armor piercing, Lauria is the worst of the three in having the lowest DPM compared to Colombo, as an example. And her AP performance is also rather lacking as well, despite having pretty decent AP shells with that hit for 14,900 maximum damage when you do get citadels. So I want to bump that up a bit more to get more mileage out of the ship. I think the most damage I've gotten the random battles I've played is I think it's 174,000 damage. Where in a Thunder, you know, having the HE or Conqueror and having more guns and really great AP there as well, I can easily do 200,000 damage with those two ships. Comparing it to the Lauria, much more easier with Conqueror in that regard. So when we're just talking about other tier 10 battleships, this isn't one that you're necessarily going for to get the most damage in the game, but it really comes down to these the SAP in the AP, where you're just going to be able to overmatch 30mm on all cruisers. Most cruisers in the game, you can overmatch 30mm with these 457s. So you're really punishing a lot of the cruisers, battle cruisers, destroyers and subs when you catch them out off guard with the SAP. I mean, of course, even battleships as well. It just depends on where your shells land and hit. So that's kind of your trick card. Your uniqueness about the Lauria is having 457 SAP. That's really what's going on here. Now, we can also talk about the Gunfire Control System Mod 2, which would extend our main battery firing range plus 16%. And yeah, I mean, I can see an argument for that. You're 19.3, but as I've pointed out, I mean, we have a spotter plane. And then if you're running Sansonetti, one of his talents is, I think it's the Far Reach, where it actually extends our main battery gun range up to, it's like 20.8 kilometers when you get your first kill. So that's one of the reasons why, you know, it's really great to have Sansonetti on your Lauria. So then you're getting that additional range without actually having to take the Gunfire Control System Mod 2, which would give you a little bit more, if I remember correctly. We'll talk about that. So I'd rather go for the DPM performance here. Long story short, I'm going to take this video too long. All right, moving on to Armament, semi-armor piercing shells. So these are the SAP, and they do big damage. You saw some of the SAP salvos in yesterday's video where we did almost 25k, then we did a 23k salvo, and you can do a lot of damage to destroyers, this, that, and the other. So I really like the SAP here. You can see maximum damage 16,600. Our penetration capacity with these is 114 millimeters. Initial velocity 757 meters a second, and again that range of 19.3. Our AP shells, reload time, again, you know, it's to 26.4 seconds. And we overmatch 30mm armor with 457. The maximum damage is 14,900 with an initial velocity of 762 meters a second. So when I was talking about how these AP shells are identical to Thunder, there's one small difference. The fuse time on these are shorter. You have a 0.015 second arm time, which is shares that common characteristic with the St. Vincent, where Thunder has a 0.033 second fuse time. Basically, having a 0.015 second fuse time means that your AP shells will arm faster, and you're less likely to overpenetrate cruisers like Minotaur or Genon, the light cruisers with citadels, as an example. So that's one of the benefits here with having a shorter fuse time. Other than that, same characteristics as the Thunder and St. Vincent guns. ISW, reload time 30 seconds. We have 2 available flights, or 2 charges I should say. 1 aircraft in attacking flight, which drops 2 bombs in the payload, with a range of 11 kilometers. I was looking at the aircraft HP of 2,000 just above. Maximum range of 11 kilometers, which is really great. It's among the best in terms of tier 10 battleships with ASW range. Ohio cries with its 5-kilometer maximum range. So this is really great to have here on the Lauria. So definitely be mindful of that, as it will help you out in dealing with subs. Consumable wise, damage control party, action time of 16.5 seconds. That's because of a commander perk we're running, otherwise it'd be 15 seconds. Our cooldown time is 80 seconds, and we have unlimited number of charges. Our repair party is plus 396 hit points per second. If I throw on the India Delta combat signal, which is going to boost the amount of HP restored when using the repair party consumable, it puts us up to 475. So if you're playing randoms, you're playing ranked, or if you are for some reason running the ship in clan battles, then you would want to, of course, be taking the India Delta combat signal. Consumable action time, it would be 28 seconds, but again, due to commander perk, it bumps up to 30.8 seconds. Cooldown time of 80 seconds, and we get 5 of them. Standard, you'd only have 4 of these. Next is the spotting aircraft or fighter that you can run on here. The spotter is just going to be your go-to, in my opinion, where it's going to extend your main battery firing range out to plus 20%, so you're even reaching further beyond 21, 22 kilometers, which is great for those times when maybe you kill the ships on your flank, and then you're needing to help the rest of your team out on center or the other flank of the map. So as an action time 100 seconds, we talked about how we could bump that up to 130 seconds if we decided to take spotting aircraft mod 1 here. Cooldown time 240 seconds, so you will be waiting on it for a long time, so make sure to utilize this only when you think it's wise and necessary to do so. Fighter, you can see you get 3 of them. This is never going to stop the first attack, and with it right now in the game, I can't really recommend you running fighter on here. Maybe if you're playing ranked, you're 7 versus 7, and there's CVs at play, then I can see a little bit more of a benefit for fighter there because you're not needing the range. That's really the only time I would think of taking fighter over the spotting aircraft. Combat signal wise, what I would run here would be as follows. So we are taking the Juliet combat signal, which completely eliminates the risk of our ship's magazine detonating. We do this if you're playing randoms, ranked, or clan battles. We're reducing or improving the fire extinguishing time, so our fires go out by negative 20% faster, and also floods negative 20% faster. We're taking Hotel Yankee, damage caused by ramming an enemy plus 50%, damage received from ramming an enemy negative 20%. Then we take November Foxtrot, which reduces our consumable reload time by negative 5%. So now you see 76 seconds, then 80. You see, again, 76 versus 80. And you see 228 seconds versus 240 seconds on the cooldown time here on the spotting aircraft. And then I have enough of them right now. You see I have 199. November Echo Set 7, which is buffing our AA damage. So it takes our AA rating up to 74 versus it being 73. Is it phenomenal? I mean, you could even run without it if you wanted to, but you're just running it. You can see it does improve our continuous damage and damage by shell explosions just by a little bit. So might as well help out a relatively poor AA platform because our firing range is 4.6 kilometers, right? And our damage overall is just really sad here on the Lauria. Alright, let's go talk about the commander. So first I need to talk about Luigi Sansonetti. He is a unique commander who you pick up via the Resolute and Rapid collection. Here in the game with buy Resolute and Rapid containers and the armory. Until you've completed that collection, then you will obtain, I don't know if he starts off at 10 or 15 points. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's how you'll get him, okay? So let's talk about his talents. So one is the Rapid Fire talent, which activates upon earning the Confederate achievement, which reduces our main battery reload time by negative 15%. You saw this activated in yesterday's video. If you've watched it, if not, it's going to be tagged at the end of the video. So improving our DPM, damage per minute performance. I quite like this. I've only gotten it once. I've only managed to get Confederate once so far. And I haven't been fishing to get the Confederate achievement on purpose, but it's something I need to be a little more mindful of in taking Sansonetti on Colombo just to spread some of my fire among the enemy ships more, just to get that improved DPM. The Far Reach talents, the remain battery firing range goes up by plus 8% once you've destroyed an enemy ship. So if you can destroy an enemy ship early on in the game, this is just going to help you go from 19.3, I believe we said it was, to 20.8 kilometers. So another reason why running Sansonetti is really helpful here on the Lauria, since her range already is kind of poor for a tier 10 battleship at 19.3. And then you have the Concealed Reserves, which activates once per battle upon hitting enemy ships 100 times with main battery shells. I've not done this yet. You know, this would be something that, you know, with Colombo's 16 guns, right? Where you're getting more main battery shell hits. And like now I'm like, wait, am I talking? I'm talking wrong. I think I just mixed it up with Cecilia. No, I'm right. 16 guns. So you're more likely to get that on Colombo than you are here on Sansonetti, since you go from, you know, or Lauria when you go from 16 to 8 guns. So I've not managed to get this yet, but you would get additional consumable action time on your DCP, your repair party, and your spotting aircraft. Now, for the battleship, the enhanced skills that Sansonetti has is the gunfeeder skill. So your main battery shell type switching time is negative 60%, which is really nice having here on the ship. So you can see minimum shell type switching time, 10.6 seconds. I'm actively going between the AP and SAP when targets are presented. Again, you can see that in yesterday's video of me utilizing this. So I do really recommend running that when we're looking at the 21-point build here. So that being said, a 21-point build, well, you can go for a pretty standard. There's really 2 build options that come into my mind here. With first taking Gunfeeder, as we just talked about what the skill does. For 3-point commander, I didn't take Grease the Gears. Your main battery traverse speed is plus 20%, which just gets us to that ultimately 28.7 seconds with this build and setup here on the Lauria. A 6-point build, I would go for Adrenaline Rush. It's going to reduce your main battery reload time, your airstrike armament reload time, your secondary battery reload time, and give you a slight buff on your continuous AA damage as for each 1% of hit points lost here on your ship. And then with a 10-point build, I would probably actually just go for Concealment Expert first. You could go for Concealment Expert first. You could go for Fire Prevention first. It's really up to you. But because the Concealment's just so good, then I go for 12. Want to go ahead and get down to 12.3. Otherwise, if Concealment's poor on your Tier 10 battleships, I will always recommend going for Fire Prevention Expert first. But let's say you already have a 14-point commander, then I'm like, yeah, just do Concealment Expert, and then pick up your Fire Prevention Expert, which reduces the risk of your ship catching fire by negative 10% and reduces your maximum numbers of fires. So if you're newer to World of Warships and you're wondering about this skill, just in real brief, currently, if you didn't have Fire Prevention Expert, you have 4 fires set on your ship, 4 places. 1 on your bow, 1's on your stern, and 2 on the superstructure. So what Fire Prevention does, instead of having 2 fires on your superstructure, you only have 1. And most players in the game are going to be focusing on your superstructure, the HE spammers, if you will. So you're going to be ticking for less damage, meaning you're building into your survivability. So Fire Prevention is really a no-brainer here on Sansonetti with Lauria to be running. With an 18-point commander, then I would recommend the Emergency Repair Expert. This is going to take our damage control party consumable action time plus 10%. So that's from the 15 seconds to the 16.5 seconds. We have unlimited charges. Our repair party consumable action time goes from 28 seconds to the 30.8. Yeah, 30.8 math. So that's really nice. So you're being able to heal more of your hit points back. And then you get an additional charge, so you get 5 heals. And I've gone through all 5 heals actually with the Lauria. So really good skill to pick up here. And then for a pretty standard 21-point build, then you can just go for basics of survivability, which is going to reduce your module restoration time. So if your main battery gets knocked out, as an example, or your engine gets knocked out, it's going to reduce the restoration time, which is good, improves it. And then your fire extinguishing time and flooding recovery time, -15%. So you're putting out the fires faster, you're putting out the floods faster, especially if you're a bit overwhelmed, like your repair party and your damage control party. So that makes up for a pretty good 21-point build here on the Lauria. So this would probably be my first recommendation. My second recommendation would actually be going for Brisk. So when we talk about her maneuverability, you have a 36.8 knots. When we were able to run Brisk, so I have to pull up my phone here, I click on it. What this does is it increases your ship speed by +10% while your ship remains undetected. So if we take that 36.8 times 1.10, it gives you 40.4 knots, or maybe it rounds it up to 40.5 knots. I'm not sure because it says 40.48. So you'd be a 40-knot battleship, which there's not too many battleships, tier 10 battleships that go 40 knots. I mean, it seems Wargaming is introducing more and more that have the ability to do so as of the last year, I would say. But that's actually quite nice. Like, I run Brisk on my Vermont build. I've had it run on Illinois, but I'm going for more an AA build on Illinois now, so I've given up Brisk. But 40.8 knots. Really, 40.48 knots, really nice to have. So I can actually see getting really good use out of the Brisk. And then I would probably go for something like the Emergency Repair Specialist, which is going to reduce your damage control party consumable cooldown time by -3%, your repair party consumable cooldown time by -3%. So then you just have your DCPs, you have your repair parties back off cooldown, just a few seconds more faster. In addition to stacking that on top of your November Foxtrot combat signal. So maybe it's around 70. Let's see. I can do the math. So if we say 76 times 0.97, 73, or it'd be probably rounded up to 74 seconds. So you get a back off cooldown time a little more quicker. Sometimes that can be the difference between life and death. It really just varies. So this would be the second build option. Layout here I would recommend on the Lauria. Other than that, in good conscience, I don't know how many other things I could really recommend here. You don't want super heavy AP shells. You don't want to be run Furious. That'd be a very bad idea. You're not a secondary battleship. You're not a brawling battleship. So you don't want close quarters combat. You're not an AA platform. You don't really need to invest in your secondaries AA with preventive maintenance. So, yeah, really, I think this is your first option. Really good to have. I mean, this would even work well for Colombo, right? And this, too, would also work well for Colombo as well. You know, when you smoke up and you're disengaging, then you go a little bit faster if you're a little overextended. So, I can see this build working well for Colombo as well. So with that being said, we're going to wrap this video up. So I hope you liked today's video in going over the Ruggiero di Lauria. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. As always, it's appreciated. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you have subscribed, thanks so much. And as always, thank you to my Patreon supporters. So until next time, take care.